When you picture the most successful pirate in history, someone who commanded a confederation of up to 800 ships and somewhere between 40,000 and 70,000 sailors, an armada bigger than most national navies at the time, who do you see? Blackbeard? Calico Jack? Their legends loom large, but their actual operations were small time by comparison. Blackbeard, for all his fame, commanded maybe 4 ships and a few hundred men. What if I told you the most dominant, most feared, and most successful pirate of all time wasn't a man, but a woman? A woman who rose from a floating brothel to challenge empires, unite her enemies, and create a pirate confederation so powerful the Chinese government had to negotiate with her as if she were a head of state. This is the unbelievable and true story of Ching Shih, the pirate queen who ruled the South China Sea. To understand how a woman with no name and no power could rise to command an empire, you first have to understand the world that created her. This wasn't the Caribbean of storybooks. This was the South China Sea at the turn of the 19th century, a chaotic, brutal, and opportunistic place. The Qing dynasty, for all its power on land, was losing its grip on the water. Its navy was underfunded and spread thin, struggling to police thousands of miles of coastline. For the millions of Tanka, or boat people, life was a desperate struggle. They were a marginalized class, forbidden by law from seeking education or holding government jobs. For many, the line between fisherman, merchant, and pirate wasn't just thin. It was practically non-existent. In the heart of this region was Canton, modern-day Guangzhou, a bustling, chaotic port, and the only place where European merchants could trade. The Pearl River Delta was a tangled web of islands and waterways, a perfect breeding ground for piracy. And at the center of Canton's vice district were the flower boats. These weren't simple brothels. They were elaborate, floating palaces of pleasure. Here, merchants and officials could enjoy feasts, music, and the company of women. But for the women who worked on them, it was a life of near slavery. Born Shi Xianggu around 1775, the girl who would one day be known as Ching Shih began her life in poverty, likely sold by her family to one of these flower boats. It was in this world of exploitation and transaction that she learned her first lessons in power. She learned how to read men, how to trade secrets, and how to survive in a system designed to consume her. She was known for her beauty, but it was her sharp mind and cunning that set her apart. She was not just a participant in this world. She was a student of it, and her education was about to take a dramatic turn. While Shi Xianggu was navigating the treacherous social currents of Canton's flower boats, a man named Zheng Yi was conquering the literal currents of the South China Sea. Zheng Yi wasn't just any pirate. He came from a long line of them. He was ambitious, ruthless, and a natural leader, and his red flag fleet was already a formidable force. But Zheng Yi had a grander vision. He knew that real power wasn't in scattered raids, but in unification. The coast was plagued by rival pirate captains who spent as much time fighting each other as they did plundering ships. Zheng Yi saw an opportunity to forge these warring factions into a single, unstoppable confederation. He began the painstaking process of creating alliances, and by 1805 he had managed to bring 6 major pirate fleets under one banner, each with a different colored flag: red, black, blue, white, yellow, and purple. This new confederation commanded hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of pirates, transforming scattered gangs into a naval power. They didn't just attack ships. They controlled trade routes and demanded protection money from coastal towns. Zheng Yi was the unifier, but even he knew that controlling thousands of cutthroats was another thing entirely. He needed more than just strength. He needed a partner with a different kind of intelligence. In 1801, his path crossed with a woman on the flower boat. The story of how they met is shrouded in legend. Some say Zheng Yi raided the brothel and abducted her. Others claim He was a client who became infatuated with her mind. But the most compelling version of the story is that this was no simple romance. It was a negotiation. According to this account, which may be dramatized, Shi Xiangbu didn't just agree to marry the most powerful pirate in the South China Sea. She demanded a partnership, a major role in the command of the fleet, and a significant share of the plunder. It was an audacious demand, but it speaks volumes about her character. She saw her value not just as a wife, but as a strategist. Incredibly, Zheng Yi agreed. This union was a masterstroke for both of them. Zheng Yi gained a brilliant partner who could help manage his complex web of alliances. She became known as Zheng Yi Sao, which simply means wife of Zheng Yi. But she was no passive figurehead. She was the organizer to his unifier, the administrator to his conqueror. While he led the battles, she managed the logistics, finances, and intricate politics of the pirate confederation. Together, they created a formidable power couple. They even expanded their family in an unconventional way, adopting a fisherman's son named Shang Pao, who had been captured by their fleet. Zheng Yi took the promising young man as his protégé and lover, and Shang Pao quickly rose through the ranks. This family unit, a pirate lord, his brilliant wife, and their adopted son, formed the core of the Red Flag Fleet's leadership. The fleet swelled under their joint command, and they were at the height of their power. But in the South China Sea, power can be as fleeting as the winds of a typhoon. In 1807, at the absolute peak of his power, Zheng Yi's life came to a sudden end. Some say he was killed in battle, but the most accepted story is that he was caught in a massive typhoon and swept overboard. The sea that gave him his empire had reclaimed him. His death plunged the pirate confederation into chaos. Zheng Yi had been the glue holding the 6 rival fleets together. With him gone, old rivalries resurfaced. The other pirate commanders saw a power vacuum and had no reason to follow the orders of their dead leader's widow. The confederation, Zheng Yi's life's work, was on the brink of shattering into a bloody civil war. Zheng Yi Sao stood at a precipice. She was a woman in a world run by violent men. She had no official title, no formal command. By all rights, her story should have ended here. But the other captains had severely underestimated her. They saw a grieving widow. They failed to see the most ruthless and brilliant political mind in the entire South China Sea. In the chaotic days following Zheng Yi's death, as other captains plotted to carve up the fleet, Zheng Yi Sao acted with breathtaking speed. She knew she couldn't command the loyalty of thousands of pirates by force alone. She needed a legitimate successor, someone the men already respected. She needed her adopted son, Shang Pao. Shang Pao commanded the powerful Red Flag Fleet and was respected by the pirates. But he was also young and, by some accounts, illiterate, a skilled warrior, but not a strategist. Zheng Yi Sao saw her opening and forged a powerful alliance. The nature of their relationship had always been complex. Now, in a move that was both deeply personal and ruthlessly strategic, she took him as her lover and eventually her husband. This partnership was genius. It instantly solidified her position. By aligning with Shang Pao, she gained his legitimacy and the loyalty of the Red Flag Fleet, the heart of the Confederation. Shang Pao became the public face of the command, the official leader of the fleet, while Zheng Yi Sao held the real power. She was the mind, he was the sword. Together, they presented a united front that the other captains couldn't challenge. In a matter of weeks, she had not just saved the Confederation from collapse, she had consolidated her control over it. But securing power was only the first step. Now she had to wield it. What truly set Zheng Yi Sao apart was not just the size of her fleet, but how she ran it. Piracy is by nature chaotic. She knew that true power requires order. To control an army of tens of thousands, she established a strict code of conduct, posted on every ship, and enforced without mercy. First, the chain of command was absolute. Any pirate who gave an order that didn't come from a superior, or who disobeyed an order, was to be beheaded on the spot. There were no second chances. This ensured her commands were followed without question. Second, she revolutionized the handling of loot. Under her code, all plunder had to be registered before distribution. The pirate who captured the goods kept 20%. The remaining 80% went into a collective treasury. This massive public fund paid for supplies, repairs, and the entire Confederation. Any pirate caught stealing from this common fund was executed. Third, discipline was maintained through terror. Desertion meant death. Some accounts say that going ashore without permission would get your ears slit for a first offense. A second offense was execution. But perhaps the most revolutionary part of her code concerned the treatment of captives, especially women. The rape of a female captive was a capital offense, punishable by immediate beheading. This was unheard of in the world of 19th century piracy. If a pirate wanted to take a captive as his wife, the relationship had to be consensual, and he was required to be faithful. If he broke that vow, he was executed. According to some stories, female captives considered unattractive or released unharmed. This brutal but visionary code created a level of discipline that no pirate fleet in history had ever known. With her power consolidated and her code in place, Ching Shih presided over a maritime force of staggering proportions. At its peak, her confederation numbered as many as 800 ships and up to 70,000 pirates. This wasn't just a pirate fleet. It was a floating nation-state. The 6 fleets of the Confederation, red, black, blue, white, yellow, and purple, operated like divisions of an army. They exerted massive influence over the South China Sea, from the coast of Guangdong down to Vietnam. They had become the de facto government of the coastal region, running a massive protection racket and taxing any merchant ship that wanted to pass safely through their territory. If a ship was caught without a pass, it was plundered. Their influence reached deep onto the land as well. They established a network of spies and forged alliances with villages, which would supply them with food, water, and recruits in exchange for protection. Villages that resisted were brutally raided. She kept meticulous records and managed a complex system of logistics and finance. She was more than a pirate captain. She was a CEO, a general, and a head of state. Her fleet was now a direct challenge to the authority of the Qing dynasty itself. The emperor could not tolerate it. A confrontation was inevitable. The Qing government vastly underestimated the woman they were dealing with. In 1808, they assembled a massive imperial fleet, confident they could sweep the pirates from the sea. They sailed out, expecting a swift victory. What they got was a massacre. Ching Shih didn't just meet the imperial navy. She crushed it. Her fleets of smaller, faster junks easily outmaneuvered the king's larger warships. She used her intimate knowledge of the coast, tides, and wind to lure the imperial ships into ambushes. In a series of humiliating defeats, her armada didn't just repel the attacks. They decimated the imperial fleet, capturing dozens of government ships in one campaign alone. They took 63 vessels. These captured ships were absorbed into her own fleet, making her armada even stronger. The government sent admiral after admiral to defeat her, and each one returned in disgrace. The terror of South China, as she came to be known, was now more powerful than ever. The Qing emperor was furious. Desperate, the Chinese government decided they needed help. If their own navy couldn't defeat her, perhaps foreign empires could. In an act of profound desperation, the Qing government sought outside help. They enlisted the aid of the Portuguese, who had a naval base in Macau, and the British, whose East India Company had a vested interest in protecting its trade routes. A coalition of 3 empires was now arrayed against a single pirate queen. This should have been the end. The Portuguese navy, with its advanced ships, posed a significant threat. In 1809, a joint Sino-Portuguese force cornered her fleet in a bay, setting up a blockade they believed was impenetrable. For weeks, they held her there, confident they had finally trapped her. They were wrong. In a daring maneuver, Zheng Yisao's fleet broke through the blockade during a storm, escaping the trap and inflicting heavy losses on her enemies. She had faced down an international coalition and emerged victorious. She was at the absolute zenith of her power. She had built an empire on the water, written her own laws, and defeated the navies of multiple world powers. She was, for all intents and purposes, invincible. So why did she give it all up? By 1810, Zheng Yisao was untouchable, but she was also a realist. She knew her situation couldn't last forever. The constant state of warfare was taking its toll. While she had defeated every fleet sent against her, the Qing government had limitless resources and could keep sending more. More importantly, the political landscape was shifting. Realizing they couldn't defeat her with force, the government changed tactics, offering amnesty a full pardon to any pirates who would surrender. This clever move was designed to break her confederation apart from the inside. She started to see signs of internal friction as other fleet commanders considered the offer. She had two choices: keep fighting, risking an eventual defeat or a bloody internal collapse, or do the unthinkable. She could negotiate. A true strategist, Zheng Yisao recognized that the greatest victory wasn't winning one more battle. It was knowing when to quit the war. Her surrender would not be an act of defeat. It would be her final and greatest strategic victory. The government's amnesty offer was open, but the talks stalled. The Qing officials demanded that the pirates kneel as a sign of submission, a humiliation Chang Pao, leading the talks, refused. So Zheng Yisao took matters into her own hands. The story goes that in an act of incredible audacity, she walked, reportedly unarmed, into the Governor-General's office in Canton, accompanied only by a small delegation of pirate women and children. It was a brilliant piece of political theater. She wasn't approaching him as a defeated warrior, but as a woman seeking peace. She personally negotiated the surrender terms. She was willing to give up her fleet, but she would not kneel. It was a standoff. Finally, a brilliant, face-saving compromise was reached. The Governor-General agreed to officially witness the marriage of Zheng Yisao and Chang Pao. As part of the ceremony, tradition required the bride and groom to kneel and thank the presiding official. And so, Zheng Yisao knelt. But she knelt not as a defeated pirate, but as a bride, thanking an official for blessing her marriage. She had submitted without surrendering her dignity. The terms she negotiated were astonishing, less a surrender and more of a retirement package. First, she and all of her thousands of pirates were granted a full amnesty. They would face no prosecution for their years of rebellion. Second, she was allowed to keep all the wealth she had accumulated, an immense personal fortune. Third, her pirates weren't cast aside. Many were given positions in the Qing military. Her husband, Chang Pao, was made a naval officer and allowed to keep a private fleet of 20 ships for his personal use. In April of 1810, the Great Pirate Confederation officially surrendered. In total, 226 ships and over 17,000 pirates came under the pardon. At the time, Ching Shih personally commanded 24 ships and about 1,400 pirates. She had achieved what almost no pirate in history ever had: a prosperous, peaceful, and victorious retirement. The pirate queen had won the game. Zheng Yisao's story doesn't end with her surrender. After her retirement from piracy, she settled in Canton. She had a son with Chang Pao, and when he died a few years later, she proved once again that she was a survivor. With the vast fortune she had kept, she did what any savvy entrepreneur with a deep understanding of vice would do. She opened a large and successful gambling house, and some sources say, a brothel. The woman who had once controlled the South China Sea now controlled one of the most profitable businesses in Canton. She lived out the rest of her days in peace and prosperity, surrounded by the wealth she had fought for. She died in 1844 at the age of 69, not in a blaze of cannon fire or on a hangman's scaffold, but peacefully of old age. It was the most unpirate-like end for the most successful pirate who ever lived. So let's go back to that first question. When you picture the most successful pirate in history, you should see her. A woman who started with nothing, a nameless prostitute on a floating brothel. A woman who, through sheer force of will and strategic genius, rose to command an empire of outlaws that humbled nations. She was a brilliant politician, a master strategist, and a leader who forged a disciplined nation out of chaos, ruled it with an iron fist, and then had the wisdom to walk away, at the height of her power, on her own terms. Her story challenges everything we think we know about piracy. It's a reminder that history's most formidable figures often rise from the margins, rewriting the rules of their world. And that is how a woman from a floating brothel became the undisputed and undefeated pirate queen of the South China Sea. We've covered the greatest pirate queen, but who was the most fearsome land-based conqueror? Let us know in the comments which historical figure you think we should cover next. And if you enjoyed this unbelievable true story, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into history.